So in this episode, we're going to talk about unanswered questions from the CMMC-AB Townhall. I'm joined by Ty Wittenberg of Rain Associates.
Morning, Todd. How are you?
Very good. So I am the Regional Sales Manager at Etactics. We're a software development company, and basically we just want to make it easier to implement CMMC, so we developed the better GRC. Ty, do you want to introduce yourself and Rain Associates?
Ty Wittenberg, as you have heard from Todd and me once again, with Rain Associates. Rain Associates is a top 100 CPA and business consulting firm located here in Ohio, but doing business with clients all across the country and providing cyber security services along with registered provider organization in the CMMC space.
And thank you for joining us. So we've been participating in these town halls for the past year, and there's a lot of questions that get asked in these events that the accreditation board either doesn't have the time to answer, or maybe the answer is just lengthier than a short response in the chat box. So I thought it might be a good opportunity for us to leverage the experience of somebody like Ty, take some of these questions from the dialogue box and talk about them. So. Well, let's talk a little bit about topic 2, which was, somebody in the comment section noted that there was a brown bag lunch session on August 27th, and they had General Skinner of DISA addressing industry, and he was apparently saying that DoD has put the brakes or put pause on CMMC. So I know that I haven't seen the video. I've requested access to view a recording of it, but I just wanted to use that as an opportunity to kind of talk about where we stand today with CMMC, actually becoming alive within the world of DFARS. So I took a look back at some of the clauses that really build up to CMMC. So we started with DFARS clause 252, 204, 7012, which is what required the NIST 800-171 compliance for any information system containing processing or storing CUI, and that was all the way back in December of 2017. And then it wasn't until very recently DFARS clauses 252, 204, 7019, and 7020 were introduced in effective November 30, 2020, and this required contractors to actually conduct an assessment of their NIST 800-171 compliance and then upload their score into the Supplier Performance Risk System, the SPRS. It also gave access to the Defense Contract Management Agency to validate self-assessment scores and require prime contractors to roll down those requirements to their subcontractors. So really what we're waiting for is this DFARS clause 252, 204, 7021. And this is where we start introducing a third-party audit through a see-through PAO. So you're in the business of consulting on CMMC, Ty. If I were to ask your professional opinion here, when do you think this rulemaking is going to happen to enact DFARS 7021?
So that's a great question, Todd. It can only be speculative at this point, but as you know, General Skinner, this is not his first hurrah at DISA. He was actually a chief of staff and deputy commander, respectively, in that particular role. And there's a handoff of leadership that needs to happen there between him and Norton. What I would say to you is that because of that, knowing from my military experience and from my corporate experience, he's going to take a very in-depth approach of where they are in the process, the impact that it has to the defense industrial base. And I think that's why you're seeing sort of this flux. I don't think he's going to labor it, but I definitely think because it is a critical part of us safeguarding our industrial base and our intellectual property and that industrial base, he and his team are going to be very methodical in how they look over the process and provide any insight recommendations to the DoD and to the CMMC-AB. So that process in itself is really sort of just a change of command exercise, if you will. And for anybody that's served in the military, we've experienced quite a few of those change of commands, and that's just due diligence, right? So I'd say give it some time. I wouldn't labor it and think that it's going to be half a year or a year for that, but you got to figure that the handoff between General Skinner and Norton is going to take a little bit of time. And even though he is up to speed on quite a few things, the support of IT and the Department of Defense globally is going to be one of his major focuses, and one of the things that, he's relatively skilled at.
So no need to rush into it, right?
Yeah, no need to rush into it. I think if we go back to it, right, and we talk about organizations seeking certification, this wait-in approach to what's going to happen from them, yeah, there's some value in it, but I would take this as, think of it more of an extended preseason that you would have in the NFL or in the NBA, where you can work out a ton of kinks before the official certification comes in. Because you and I have talked about it before in the past when we did the cyber war, security wars with you guys with Etactics. We talked about the maturity is really about culture change, and so that takes time. And so instead of waiting to figure out what's going to happen next, start building in what you do know is important around that cyber culture, around those domains, around that NIST 171. And then technically, whatever advice comes from General Skinner and from the DoD and the CMMC-AB, you should be able to pivot relatively quickly versus now having to, you waited and now you have to build the culture after you found out which way to go. So I challenge every organization seeking certification to pay attention to what's going out there in the news, but more importantly, continue to build that culture into your people, your process, and your procedures.
So let's talk a little bit about some recent news on that front. Did you happen to read the industry letter by the NDIA in conjunction with PSC and ITI?
So unfortunately, I have not. So, but bring me up to speed. What's the high level notes from it?
So this was a letter published by these trade associations that work with a lot of the defense industrial base. They talked specifically about CMMC to the Department of Defense, and they had 6 points that they wanted to relay. One, they requested that DoD regularly engage with industry. I think right now a lot of that engagement happens through the accreditation board. And the accreditation board doesn't necessarily speak for DoD on many topics. So I think that suggestion was, have more open lines of communication between DoD and industry. And I think, that certainly makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Number 2, standardize the marking practice for CUI. So we have talked offline about some of the engagements that you've had, but it's certainly something I think you've heard in the field, right? The lack of standardization when it comes to marking CUI and FCI.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
Third, harmonize CMMC with other federal cybersecurity frameworks like FedRAMP. So I think that kind of talked a little bit about other frameworks other than FedRAMP, but FedRAMP is the big one that people keep coming back to say, is there going to be reciprocity between FedRAMP certifications and CMMC? And I don't know that it's really been communicated other than some of the things that I've read in 7012, which point to FedRAMP and say if it's a FedRAMP moderate environment and you're using it as a cloud solution for an information system, yes, you can use FedRAMP moderate, but you also have to use clauses C through G, which are the cybersecurity reporting, which not every FedRAMP moderate cloud provider would be able to offer. So I think that that's very appropriate as well. Clarify authorities for implementing requirements. So that was really talking about who's in charge here of implementation. Is it the director at the NSA? Is it DoD? Clarify the people who are in authority over implementation of these requirements. And 5, provide support and guidance for small businesses. And I think where you are in Ohio, you've got a lot of the manufacturing base out your way. Do they feel supported, in your opinion, out in Ohio when it comes to these smaller machine shops and manufacturers?
So those are all great points. I'll start with the last one that you just talked about. The support is really about getting a lot of the knowledge out there. There's been quite a few summits across the country that have tried to get organizations seeking certification, get in essence, a mass group of solutions such as Etactics, your organization, the Microsofts of the world, the Azure clouds, you name it, to kind of get together and provide information for folks. I would say that, to answer your question directly, do they feel supported? No, but I think it's a lack of understanding what resources are out there. For those organizations that have partnered with manufacturing extension programs or magnets throughout any of the states across our 50 US states, they probably are feeling some support because there's some solutions out there that have been focused on this, and funding that has been provided from the government to help these small manufacturers that might be dipping their toe into the defense industrial base and have to get to this cybersecurity maturity model, because really it ties in pretty closely to Industry 4.0 as well, too, around strengthening the information technology in the manufacturing process. So the direct answer to that is it's probably 50-50. I would say there's some folks out there that feel supported small, who know about their resources, and then the other group out there that don't. So it's really more about folks being ambassadors of what's out there for solutions to help them achieve this particular maturity model. So I would tell you, for anybody that's listening today with us, if you haven't gone out to your manufacturing extension partnerships in your local state or around your areas, take a look at those. Take a look at the magnet programs. Take a look at your procurement training. They call it a PTAC that usually comes out of universities as a resource for you. There is really a ton of free education that they're trying to give to folks out there. Doesn't necessarily give you any education on cost, but the reality is if you're going to bid on $1 million projects and bring in that top line revenue, you're going to have to expect to spend some money on your infrastructure. And that infrastructure means more than just your technology. That might mean shoring it up with personnel that are IT specialists, or outsourcing that to a Ray and Associates or MSP or MSSP, a managed security service provider, which I think we're probably going to talk about at some point here. Let me back up a little bit about the standardization of CUI. The National Archives has really been handling that and has handled that type of standardization for quite some time. So if folks are in question about the markings and things like that they need to put on that information, please go out to the National Archives and look at how they tell you to tag or cover letter, controlled unclassified information, federal contract information. There is guidance out there for that. I think what winds up happening, you know this, Todd, as well as anybody else, is like you're getting bombarded with all these expectations. You have to go to so many different sources. You talked about this NDI article. There's that. There's the Office of Acquisitions. There's DFARS. There's the Federal Acquisition Regulation. There's the DoD. There's the DIBCAC. There's flourishes of things that deal with FedRAMP. Find somebody, if you don't want to be the repository of that information, find an organization that is making it their business every day to know those things and help you navigate those waters.
Very good.
And then the last thing, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to mention just one more that you kind of touched on, which was, clarify some policies. I think, right now, a lot of organizations that are working towards gathering their evidence and being compliant are asking the question, what's the scoping guidance? We really haven't been given much in terms of scoping guidance. And I think that kind of talked to a point that you had, that there really isn't a crystallization of what, the requirements are yet. So I think that if they were able to provide a more detailed scoping guide, I think for a lot of organizations that are already started down this road, that's going to be extremely helpful for them to identify what systems are within the scope and what systems are outside.
You can identify your scope and you can minimize it, right? The real one-trick pony is, how can you minimize the scope of systems, right? Who touches controlled unclassified information, through access management, through, your identity and access management, through your authorization process, through how you store and how you encrypt data. All those things will be critical. If you allow folks in your organization to utilize mobile devices and you don't have a mobile device management policy, but they can access that controlled unclassified information on their own personal tablets or mobile phones, that increases the landscape, right? So the trick here is helping organizations to figure out how to minimize that scope. But more importantly, when you talk about the certifications, I would challenge anybody out there that maturity levels 1 through 3 are pretty well defined. There might be some maturation of maturity level 3, especially with communications that come out from executive orders and from General Skinner. But I would say to you, where we are in flux with the model from conversations that I've had is around maturity levels 4 and 5, right? Because where does top secret, where does secret fall into play with this? Is there a maturity level 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, 5.1, you name it. So I don't want to speak to say that I don't want to speak to say that that's what's happening, but the reality is it's in flux.
Well, I think this letter from NDIA and the other industry groups, brought up some great points that, you've heard out in the field firsthand, concerns from small businesses. And I think just, in the community in general, there are some unanswered questions that this letter, kind of calls out and says we like more regular communication with DoD on what the responses are, because they are asking a big commitment from, these small businesses to, demonstrate that they're doing all these things, and that's a sizable investment for a lot of these firms. So making sure that investment is going to be worthwhile, and that this is actually going to come into fruition, I think is one of the concerns that gives some small businesses maybe a little bit of pause before they start moving forward to document that they're doing all these things. But bigger picture, 110 of the 130 maturity level 3 requirements are already in place, right? This 800-171 is already a requirement by virtue of the DFARS 7012. So it's not like we're asking, 110 new items. It's really going to be 20 new items. The Delta 20 that once CMMC is implemented would be the new requirements. But I think the big concern is now we're going to have third-party auditors come in and actually verify that everything that we say we've been doing for these past 4 years we're actually doing, and here's the documents to demonstrate that we are.